Transfer pricing evolution, that is me. What we're going to do is we're going to cover a timeline. And from the beginning to here, I'm not going to bore you. There's a lot of also great innovations that happened along the way to illustrate how old some of these rules are. But before we do that, one of the most important things is what's coming next. So the OECD timeline. Happened to be at the OECD conference last week, and there was a lot of great discussion. So I'll give you a summary to help you guys out. First, July 2013, BEPS was released, 15 action items. January 2014, they released their first draft, and this was well before they had it finalized on purpose, which is different from what the OECD usually does. Well, they've received over 3,000 pages of comments. They had 3 webcasts with over 5,000 participants, so this is a hot topic. A lot of people are giving feedback, and they're basically organizing that. With the feedback and the regulation, they believe that they're pretty solid in 3 areas: the digital economy, streamlining BEPS, and then also eroding regimes. They feel that they have those solid, they're going to have a good write-up, and they're done. They also feel pretty darn close for other areas: hybrid mismatches, treaty abuses, intangibles, and country-by-country reporting. Those are going to be presented to the G20 nation, the financial ministers, on September 28th. Assuming that this works and that they hit their timeline, they basically assume they're going to get sign-off. They get sign-off, the next step is a summit. And what they're trying to do is get all 44 nations together in a room and get them to go big bang. Because they realize if a country dribbles it out one by one, by one, by one, by one, it'll take forever and there'll be a lot of breaks. If they get a percentage, and are they going to get everybody? No, they're not going to get everybody. But are they going to get a percentage? Yeah. That way they can really enact this and push this forward. Now, there's 2 core things that came out, at least when I was there. One is country-by-country reporting. And they were like, yep. At one point, I think it was the IRS minister, basically said, yep, you're going to have to redo all your general ledger systems. Which I was amazed. It was the first time technology had ever been mentioned on stage in OECD that I can remember. But they were like, we simplified it from 16 line items to 7 line items. That's our compromise. You got to figure that out, the rest of it. The second thing that came out of it is that's just one part of the pain. The other part of the pain is there are 44 countries here. There's 64 countries with rules right now. A lot of them are receiving this information for the first time. What is that going to lead to? That's going to lead to a significant percentage of countries opening up audits and saying, hey, with questionnaires. So not only are you going to have to enact it, but there's immediately going to be a burden of a lot of questions, and how are you going to comply with that? So those are the 2 core challenges that came out of the OECD conference. So what's one thing they can agree on? Because, by the way, there's a lot of disagreement. It was hysterical. At the conference, you could see one of the ministers would talk, and another one would just look like disgusted at whatever they were talking about. So it was really funny. But the one thing they do agree on is that there has to be change. And why does there have to be change? I'm going to go through an example to kind of illustrate it, because this was actually mentioned on stage. We're going to start in China. China mobile app. Mobile app collects information for 30 million people. It then gets sent over to India, where it's processed, turned into a usable format, nice and compiled. Great. Well, India gets a cost plus probably for this. It then gets sent over to Ireland. Ireland's where the selling entity is. And Ireland sells it to a clothing manufacturer in UK. UK uses it to sell clothes back to China. Well, most of the money is going to be taxed in Ireland. China is the original source country, gets 0. It's providing all the raw material. Now, this is a modern age, mobile example, kind of crazy on the fringe, and I get that. So let's go through some other examples. Well, what is this? Does anybody actually know what this is? Well, if I didn't have a washing machine, it'd be pretty tough to tell. It's actually a washing machine, but it's not a washing machine. It's the coolest washing machine you've ever seen. You can put weight So it automatically washes the clothes when it hits a certain weight. It has a mobile app, so you can start it from home. When you arrive, it's already done. And it also has parts, so it will order its own parts when it breaks. Like, so amazing. Another example is a car. This is a self-driving car in Nevada made by Audi. I want one. You don't have to touch the steering wheel. You automatically go wherever you need to go. Now, these are traditional items, a washing machine and a car. Most people in this room probably have one. What happens when the car comes for free and you pay a monthly subscription to be driven around, and that's based in the Cayman Islands? Who gets the tax revenue there? So these are examples of way the world's working, and they realize that the rules need to change. So we're going to go through now and do a little history of how these rules came to place in the first. Starting with 1928. 1928 is when the IRS first put in rules. Well, also the first television was invented back then, and that's what a television looked like. So obviously there's been a little bit of change since then. Arm's length standard, still the basic founding principle of transfer pricing. 1935, would anybody know that that's a computer? Right there. That is the first computer. So that's what we would have on our desk if we were back in 1935. Pretty cool. But that's still the fundamental principle about what we're saying. This is how we compare transfer pricing globally. Regulations, transfer pricing, methodology. CUP was invented 68. Also, tape recorder. There. My daughter doesn't even know what a tape recorder is. She saw one and she was confused. She's like, what is this? How does it work? So that kind of shows. Now we get into 1972. 482 in the US was invented. Pretty darn cool. But also, this is the first Apple. Looks a little bit different than what you see today. So you basically have 50 years of not that much change. Good. You know, some of the technology is getting better. Now you start to see the pace pick up, where you see intercompany pricing. DuPont for the first regulation that the IRS actually won under 482. On the bottom, you see Microsoft Windows. Can you imagine a world without Microsoft Windows? That's only 85. So we're really beginning to pick it up. Also, that first phone down there, think of how the phone's in your pocket. Imagine trying to carry that around. Okay, 1990s. There's a lot of innovation on this. I'm going to focus on the OECD transfer pricing guidelines. This is where intangible rules came out. This is where hierarchy came out. This is where profit-based methodology came out. Hierarchy was eventually killed in later regulation. Also, Google on the web, World Wide Web. And now you see 2000, more. You see the first Apple iPhone, which is pretty cool. You also have another revision of the OECD guidelines. So there was a big wave in 1990s, a little bit, taper off in 2000. And here's what we're seeing now. We're seeing tons of regulation come out, and everybody's participating. You have new participants. United Nations, who you're going to hear speak on stage here, is a participant. World Bank is a participant because developing nations feel underprivileged from the more advanced nations. And BEPS is definitely coming, or at least that's our view. In addition to just the regulation, you see more and more countries getting on board. If you go back just the past 5 years, the amount of nations that have enacted transfer pricing rules has about doubled. This is going to continue, and the reason why, every nation that doesn't have transfer pricing rules feels that it's being taken advantage of by the nations that do, and that they're losing tax revenue. So the only way to comply is to get on board. Now, these are going to be more junior nations too. They're going to need a lot of help. They're going to send you a request in their country that you've never had before, which just exasperates the problem. So it's not just about the new rules, it's also about more countries piling on top. Now, I've heard this argument a couple times, actually in UK on stage. What makes you think now? Why are these changes actually going to happen? Whereas the past 10, 5 years, people have talked about it, but it really hasn't really taken place. Well, the reason why is because of media scrutiny. That taxpayers worldwide believe that transfer pricing is bad. Now, that's not correct, but that's the belief out there, and they're asking for change. You see it with respected brand names are being dragged through the mud because of transfer pricing. And I'll end with this one thought. My father has no idea what I'm doing. He doesn't know transfer pricing. I've tried to explain. I've sent him information. But he watches Jon Stewart, and he hears that products, so I'll actually read it. Senators applaud Apple CEO Tim Cook for his amazing products and his out-of-the-box interpretation of the American Corporate Tax Code. So this is what my father believes I do now. So when Jon Stewart is talking about tax code, tax policy, there's enough pressure on politicians and senators to make this happen. And that's why we believe that everyone in this room should understand what's going on and spend some time. You have one day. Just think, am I doing things the same way I was doing 5, 10, 20 years ago with Excel spreadsheets, Word doc, disks, or is there one way to do it better? And talk amongst yourselves, talk with the experts in the room, grab Jeremy, Dwayne, and have your conversation, get your 3 questions answered. And with that, thank you very much for being here.